and welcome to a slightly less than professional live stream number 23. Let me just bring this up on my account here so that I can monitor the comments that come in. Don't know why it always takes a little while to do this. Right, there we go. Right, just pause it there. Right, there we are. So, ready for things to come in. Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe says, good evening. Good evening, sir. Jonathan Bramwell says, good evening. Good evening, sir. Mr. Adam Tom says, good evening, sir, and fellow Lloyd Vehicle Consulting viewers. Good evening, sir. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV says, evening all. Evening to you, sir. Carl Ravioli says, evening. Good evening, sir. You see, we're very polite on this channel. That's one thing that you probably noticed. We're very, very polite, and we like to use the appropriate greetings in all situations. So we're going to be talking today about strange rebadges of cars. One of them that you would have seen on the channel a little bit earlier on in the week is a 2017 Citroen C0, which was a rebadged version of the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, it was called, and also the Peugeot Ion. They were all sold together. I think the last year for those was 2018 in this country for the Citroen, but the numbers by then were absolutely tiny. Sold at a dealership, I think, in the area where I photographed it, which is in actually no, that's not true. To get this right, the car was sold in London. It was actually sold in London, LC something, which would be kind of area to the northwest or into central somewhere. That makes sense, actually. Then, of course, the Fiat Sedici, which was a rebadged Suzuki SX4, and a Subaru, which was based on the Toyota Verso S. So, yes, all sorts of interesting rebadges of strange things. Chambers 101 says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you, sir. Sir Depeche Mode is here. Good evening, sir. Caravioli says, strange rebadgings. The Mazda 121 is crying out. Yes, I think the one you're talking about is the Ford Fiesta Mark IV based 121, actually, as far as I understand it. Mark from Bad Book says, good evening. Good evening to you as well, sir. Sir Depeche Mode says, wasn't the 323 rebadged Fiesta? No, that's the 121. The Mark 4 Fiesta was the 121. Paulie Galtieri says, Guten Abend, Herr Lloyd. Guten Abend, mein Herr. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV says, Lothian Borders Police are one of those Mitsubishi electric cars. I suppose they're sort of trying to save money and having one of those little i-MiEVs. Mr. Alan Simpson says, good evening. Good evening to you as well, sir. A very familiar, I think, person with little electric Mitsubishis. Mark's PKS says, good morning. Oh, whereabouts are you, Mark? You must be somewhere else because it's evening here. You must be somewhere else in the world. So Depeche says there's a 121. Yeah, that's right. Although for many, many years, a Mazda 323 was sold as a Ford, the Ford Laser, of course. Alan Simpson said the Suzuki Swift and Toyota Corolla are a good example. Yes, exactly. Both made in Britain by Toyota, by factory in Derbyshire. And it's a car really to, I think, get around some kind of legislation to do with CO2 on average fleets and things like that. I think Suzuki Across, which is a Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid, it's exactly the same type of thing too. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV says a Ford Festiva was the Mazda 121, which became the Kia Pride. You are absolutely correct. It's very difficult for me to remember who was the person who, or the manufacturer who's actually started off that little car, because Ford sold it from '87, Mazda maybe '87 as well. Kia quite soon after that too. So all sort of together, really. Oh, we've got even more stuff here. Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe says, I'd like a Rover 416i based off the Honda Integra. Unfortunately, I think those are only sold in Australia, sir, so perhaps not. Thomas Weir says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you as well, sir. Mark's PKS is in New South Wales. We're at 6:37 a.m. Wow, we've truly got some international people on the live stream at the moment. That's wonderful. Thank you for joining us early in the morning. Oh, Captain Reed from Life on Cars says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you as well, sir. Alan Simpson says, can we mention the Aston Martin Signet? We can. That was a rebadged Toyota IQ with the 1.3 3-litre engine that I've just driven in 2 different cars within the course of a few days. Very popular engine in Toyotas. The Signet was only available, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Signet was only available if you actually already had an Aston Martin. As far as I know, they're very rare because, well, they're about 3 times the price of a standard Toyota IQ, so that's probably why. Mr. Paulie Galtieri talks about Kia Pride. Yeah, we've covered that, sir. Yes, Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV says about the VW Apollo. Yes, you're absolutely right. The VW Apollo was a slightly facelifted Mark V Escort. You're absolutely correct about that. That was in the South American market. Mr. Harbour from Rover Joe says that he could always import a Rover 416i from Australia. The Rover Quintet, which is also for Honda Quintet, that was earlier than the 416i. You could, sir, but that might cost you a lot of money, and also trying to find one even in Australia might be hard. Trabley says, good evening to everyone. Good evening to you as well, sir. Chambers 101 says, the first Land Rover Discovery sold for a Honda, the Honda for a while. Yes, it absolutely was. It was sold as the Honda Crossroad. I think generally in the Japanese domestic market, I think only as well with the 3.5 litre V8. So yes, interesting one, that one. Never over here. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, I was at a retro car meet and there was a heavily modified IQ there. Yes, I've seen some of those modified IQs. I'm not sure that's my taste particularly, but you can modify them a bit. Mr. Simpson says, I had lots of fun with a Mitsubishi Ivy that was part of the council fleet. It was the first electric car club in Scotland and now lives in the Grampian Transport Museum. Yes, I think that's probably a good place because they were a bit of a curiosity, really, those. Caravioli, again, a very good point here. Quite obviously, one of the weirdest rebadgings, the Alfa Romeo Arna and the Nissan Cherry Europe. You count that as a rebadging and not a joint venture between Alfa and Nissan. I think I'd probably count that as something like rebadging to an extent because the Cherry body was already been designed by Nissan, really. I don't think Alfa Romeo had any input really on the actual design of the exterior of it. Certainly, they changed the front suspension. They put different engines in it. I think the rear was slightly different as well. Some of the interior bits were different. So they had a degree of influence on it. It's a bit like the Rover 400 HHR, Rover 45, in that they had more of an influence on it than just sticking some badges on it, like, I don't know, a Honda Crossroad or something like that. But it wasn't really like a collaborative design. I think they just sort of modified it as opposed to actually having a degree of influence on the design of the body shell. Right. Mr. Harwood says, very true, sir. Yes, expensive to import cars from Australia to here. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, yeah, the Suzuki Alto Nissan Pixo. I would really like to drive a Nissan Pixo or that generation of Suzuki Alto. I'd really want to do that. I think I do have a viewer who might be able to get me one actually. So we'll see if we can actually go and have a go in one of those. Sir Depeche Mode asks, when was I at the Black Country Living Museum? It was a week ago, sir. Exactly a week ago. Duncan Letts says the Triumph Herald and Vitesse. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, the Vitesse was a straight six version of the Herald. I'm not really sure if that's a rebadging because it's within the same company, but yeah, I suppose so. Mark from Bad Books has a good point here. When was the most recent Vauxhall rebadged? Yes, it was. That was a Chevrolet Spark imported from South Korea. I have driven actually one of those, but not on the channel. And it feels very, very kind of former day to extent. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I've had South Korean made Chevrolets myself, and they're not necessarily that bad, actually. Mr. Simpson mentioned something that's a very common car over here. The iGo 107 and the C1, and of course the iGo 108 and C1. I think the 108 and C1 have just finished production. I have driven a first generation iGo, a very late one, a 14 plate. Again, not on the channel. The Mark II Yaris is a much better car, to be honest, but it is obviously a more expensive car. But personally, if you can afford it, I'd go for the Mark II Yaris over a iGo personally. That's just my opinion. Mark's PKS, yes, from New South Wales. A quick question: do you know how we in right-hand drive it kind of end up with the indicator stalk on the left-hand side? Europe and America don't have it on the right-hand side. It's just sort of commonality of parts. I mean, originally, if you drive very old British cars, they have the indicator stalk on the right, and the Japanese have had it on the right for, I don't know, ages. I think it's just commonality of parts. Eventually, they stop kind of switching them around. I don't know. Jonathan Bramble makes a very good point. What is tonight's tipple? This is rosé wine, sir, left over from Valentine's Day because my lady wife is a very moderate drinker. And so there was some left, so I'm going to take a sip right now. Very nice. Excellent. I mustn't drink too much of that because when I have alcohol on these live streams, my responses tend to be a little bit slower. Paulie Gautieri, another excellent point for Triumph Acclaim. Yes, a lightly restyled Honda Civic Ballard. The Ballard wasn't sold in this country with that generation, but it was sold with the next generation that was also known as the Rover SD3 or 213 or 216. Stuart Saunders, how about the IQ and the Aston Martin Signet? Yeah, we've already actually covered that earlier on. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV, the Ford Probe and the Mazda MX-6. That really wasn't a rebadging. That was a sort of a rebody, but they were built in the same factory, I think, in America. The second generation Probe and the MX-6. So, but I think also was it the second generation one we got over here. We didn't get the first generation one over here, I think. Crazy Chris, aka Pluto, interesting name. Another Vauxhall I can think, which is the Sintra, which was a rebadged Chevrolet from America. You're absolutely correct. It was I think what was it? Chevrolet Venture, I think it was called. You have to correct me. It was also sold as a Buick, and I think you can still buy a Buick in China with that particular body. And an Oldsmobile. I don't think I did a Cadillac one, but it was sold on a many different brands. The Sentra was a complete disaster when it came in here, not the least of which it did a very poor crash test, but I think it was just a general disaster anyway without that crash test. Mr. Adam Toms says the Suzuki Splash and Vauxhall Aguila. Yes, that's correct. The second generation Aguila. That's absolutely correct. I have actually driven a couple of Aguilas, one manual, one auto. Unfortunately, not on the channel, but they're not bad actually. Those cars. The previous Aguila was a rebadged Suzuki Wagon R Plus. I've got a Jag and a Stag. It's an excellent username. says the Suason Corolla. We've actually covered that already, sir, this evening. Mr. Simpson says the Seat Toledo Mark IV and the Skoda Rapid, but as in the 2012 onward Rapid. Yes, Mr. Simpson owns the Mark IV Toledo, and so did I until 2020. So yes, we can rate to that one very well. I prefer the look of the Seat myself. That's just my opinion. Mr. Harwood is talking about the VAZ 2101, also known as the Lada, mainly the Lada Reaver. Was that a different code? Very confusing with the VAZ codes. Very confusing. Cara Violi says those Cintras were awful and very rare. They're very rare now. I did actually get a photograph of one from one of my channel viewers the other day. He is in, where is he? Somewhere in Northamptonshire. And there is one lurking out there, but they're very rare. But I'd take one of the very rare four-wheel drive Mark 1 Ford Galaxy gears. Oh, do like a nice Ford Galaxy gear, the V6 engine. Very nice. And a beige leather interior. Yes, obviously that was also sold as the Seat Alhambra Mark 1, Volkswagen Chiron Mark 1. Although the Galaxy finished production in 2006, and the next one that was also similar to the Ford S-Max, that didn't continue on the same platform as the Volkswagen Group cars, which lasted until 2010, and then they were replaced with the Mark II versions, which I think went out of production in 2020 or 2021, as far as I remember. Mr. Harwood and Rojo says, not sure if it's a joint development, but this 107 Igo and C1. Yeah, they were a joint development. We've actually covered those already, sir. Mr. Simpson says the Peugeot 208 and Vauxhall Corse are basically the same. Yeah, absolutely. But they're not, the body's not the same on them, but the underpinnings are the same. And the platform of that is used in so many Stellantis Group cars now. It's crazy. But I think I'm driving another car on that platform quite soon. Simon from Lot 76 Cars this evening all. Simon actually has just done a review of the 45 V6. So if you want to see another review of 45 V6, go and have a look on Lot 76 Cars channel because it's just gone up. He filmed that earlier this week whilst I was having a go in the Yaris, which he owns. Have I missed something here? No, I haven't. Let's keep going. Crazy Chris, aka Pluto. Central was voted worst car on the old Top Gear. Yes, late 90s, I think it was, in the Top Gear survey. I'm pretty sure you're right. Paulie Galtieri says the Cadillac Cimarron. Yeah, that didn't go well. Rebadged Chevrolet Cavalier or J-Car in the 1980s. That was bad. Chambers 101 of Vauxhall Monterey. Yes, that was a rebadged Isuzu Trooper Mark II. I think you could get a V6 with that. Scottish car enthusiast and trains TV, Mr. Waters. The Seat XXIII on the Audi A4 was bad engineered. Yes, the Seat Toledo Mark III was such a disaster that they had to come up with replacement really quickly. And the Audi A4 was just finishing a generation, so they literally took the production line from I think it was Ingolstadt, and put it in Spain, and just did some light restyling to the car, and sold it as the XXIII and then in 2012 the Mark IV Toledo was ready. So pretty clever, and you could get a state or a saloon. It's a nice looking car, the XXIII actually. Henry Hall 8538. Good evening, sir. What do you think of classic Range Rover? Just imagine get one with a good chassis and good engine, have it checked over, changeable bushes, and you get a decent modern classic. I've never driven one of those, to be honest. I'm not really a kind of a Land Rover person. I don't really know much about them. I know a lot of people do. I don't honestly know much about them other than that there were two of them in the New Avengers. That's much as I really know. I've got a channel viewer who knows an awful lot about those, but I don't personally know much about them. Mr. Waters, Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV, says the Ford Maverick and Nissan Terrano 2. Yes, the 1990s Maverick, not the earlier one. They were the same. Another joint thing was the Nissan. I can't remember the name of it in America, but the Mercury Villager was actually, Nissan Quest, that's it. Mercury Villager and the Nissan Quest also from that kind of collaboration. Paulie Galtieri, he's talking about the XXIII and have the Audi A4 convertible interior. Yes, slightly different from the standard one. The XXIII did have the Audi A4 convertible interior, but the facelifted version of that generation, which I can't remember, it's B something, and I forget which one it is. Alan Simpson says lots of Daihatsus and Perodduas. Yes, I've been to Malaysia and it's full of Perodduas everywhere. They just kind of take current or former Daihatsu designs and modify them, but the engineering is very similar with the Perodduas. He says the Move and the Canary, yeah, the Nipper and the Platzi Mira, yeah, the Quore and the Kalisa, yeah, the Sirion and the it's either Myvi or Mivi. I never know which one it is. I have driven the Daihatsu Sirion that the Mivi was based on, or Myvi, but I have never driven a Perodua personally. I'd like to try one. I've driven some Protons, but not a Perodua. Roger Bramble says the Renault 12 and the Dacia 1300 or TS. Yeah, that's correct. Duncan Letts is absolutely correct. He says the Peugeot 4007, the Citroen C Crosser, and the Mitsubishi Outlander. They were all the same car. Stuart Saunders says so many variants on the ADO 16 platform. Yep, there were an awful lot of those. Been going on for years, isn't it? Coravioli again talking about the Vauxhall Sentra. The warranties on those Sentras couldn't run out quick enough. The Vauxhall expensive parts were really unreliable. Yep, the 2.2 Ecotech block was all for reliability. Yeah, they do have problems, those 2.2s. Chambers 101 says it's a good one. Crazy Chris, aka Pluto, says the Fiat 500, that would be the 2007 to present model, and the Mark II Ford car, the same floor-plan engines. You're absolutely correct. Complete with that sort of dash-mounted gear leader. That's how you can tell as well. Trabelli says a different subject. Worst cars to drive in windy weather. Mine was a 1986 Sierra. I think anything that's really tall and high-sided would be a bit tricky. Mr. Coleman and I were speaking about this the other day. Simon Lot 76 Cars says the City Rover and the Tata Indica. Yes. Not a fan of the City Rover, really. Not really. If you want to go back through the No Budget Reviews archive and see what I think of a City Rover, just have a look. It didn't go well when I drove one in 2020. Caravioli says, for another, the Talbot Samba, the Peugeot 104, and the Citroen LNE. I would sell my left kidney for a 104 ZS. Was it XS or ZS? I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah, that's another one. The Samba was quite heavily restyled, actually. If you sort of park a 104 and a Samba next to each other, they are the same car, but the facelift was quite considerable, actually. It's a bit more than I originally thought. Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe, the Os Allegro and the Innocenti Regent. You're absolutely correct. Regent was only sold, I think, for 18 months, though. Simone from Hooked on Classics. Good evening, Simone. I'm sorry, I was working on a Kawasaki engine. That sounds interesting. Says hello to Crazy Caress, aka Pluto. Adam Toms makes a very good point here. This is a more kind of normal collaboration because Ford had a stake in Mazda, I think, until about 2010 or something. So a lot of Mazdas had sort of Ford platforms and Ford engines for a long time. Then the Mondeo Mark III had a Mazda engine, as did the 1.8 Focus Mark II was also a Mazda engine. But his point is that the second generation Maverick was a Titan Mazda Tribute. I saw a Mazda Tribute fairly recently. They are very, very rare in this country, but they are around. I saw one quite recently. I think it was in Bournemouth. I've got a Jag and a Stag, says the Bristol Fighter and Dodge Viper. Really? I've never heard of that. I'm sure you're right. I didn't realise that. That's interesting. Mark's PKS says the Isuzu Trooper was the Holden Jackaroo. That's in Australia. Yes, absolutely correct. Crazy Chris, aka Pluto, asks about Simone from Hooked on Classics Kawasaki engine. Bad Books is talking about the Morris Oxford, and the Hindustan Ambassador. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The Oxford from the mid-50s was sold as the Hindustan Ambassador with lots and lots and lots of facelifts and changes until 2014. I went to one of those in India actually that year. But they were a lot of those around as taxis in India at the time. Handling was those is not good. Alan Simpson said for Suzuki Swift and Subaru Justy. That's correct. That would be Swift sold in the late 90s over here. And then the Subaru Justy, Daihatsu Sirion and Perodua, Myvi or Mivi. Yeah, that's correct. In the late 2000s, those three cars were virtually identical. Then Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV is talking about the Eurovans, the Fiat Ulysse, the 806 and the Citroën Synergie, also known as the Evasion in other countries. That's right. There was also a Lancia version of that too, but not over here. Simone from Hooked on Classics says, I've been cleaning the sump ready to go back on. I presume it's on the Kawasaki motorcycle. 1888 FC says, thoughts on the 2.2 GM direct engine. Is that the one that was in the Sintra and the Vectra? Duncan Letts, Ford Mondeo and X-Type. I've actually driven both a Mark III Mondeo and the Jaguar X-Type on No Budget Reviews. I drove the X-Type in 2020 and I drove the Mondeo in 2021. They're both on the No Budget Reviews playlist. Do you want to have a look at those? Crazy Chris here, Pluto is talking about, I think, Simone from the Motorbike again. Be ready for the road. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV is talking about the Type 4 platform cars. Those were the just go up here because we've got a lot of comments coming in this evening. The Alpha 164, Saab 9000, Lancia Thema, and Fiat Chroma. Now, the Lancia Thema, Fiat Chroma, and Saab 9000 were more similar because the 164, although Fiat and Alfa Romeo were not part of the same company whilst it was being designed, the car was rebodied more extensively than the other three. Although the Saab 9000, I think the doors aren't the same as on a Chroma and a Thema. I would like to try one of those, actually. It's difficult to get hold of a Type 4 car sometimes. Mr. Richardson Viewers Driving has been trying for ages to get hold of all of them, and I don't think he's actually quite made it. Simone Classic says, no chance. Crazy Chris, aka Pluto, says, and I thought of another one. The original Smart 44 was a Mitsubishi Colt. Yes, that's the Colt sold from 2004 underneath, but with smart funky plastic body. The 44 was a total and utter sales disaster. They thought they were going to sell loads of them, but they never did. The Colt lasted until 2011. I think the 44 lasted until 2006. Absolute utter disaster for Smart for some reason. Made in the factory in Netherlands. I think it's called Nedcar. Trabelli says good evening to Simone. Simone says good evening to Trab. Simone says good evening to Mr. Waters. John Cotton Classics, new to your channel. Nice to be here. Welcome, John. Welcome to the complete shambolic madness that is the live streams. Paulie Galtieri says steering switch interior fittings like air vents from a Ford Sierra and Aston Martin recently. What sort of Aston Martin was that? Very interesting. Chambers 101 says Volkswagen sold a rebadged Hilux called the Taro. They did indeed. It was built, I think, in Germany, that one. When I was at school, the groundskeeper actually had a VW Taro. I had a lift in it once. It was interesting. Scottish Car Enthusiast Trades TV says to Simone Hunter Classics, hello, hope you're doing well. Simone seems to be having quite a few greetings. Mr. Simpson says, I'm really sorry I have to go. I just see everyone's chat. Enjoy your wine. Thank you, sir. I am enjoying this rosé very much. Henry Hole 8538 is going to talk about the EMP platform. He says the Peugeot 2008 shares its platform with 208 and many Citroëns. I find the small SUV spacious and comfortable as if three adults able to fit in the back. Its engine is brilliant. Which engine is that, sir? Is that the 1.2? Because there are certain engines in the 2008 that we don't talk about. Simone from Putnam Classics says hello to John Cotton Classics. How is your Allegro? We quite like Allegros on this channel, actually. I had a very nice time driving Alex's Allegro, Alex's assets last year. It was brilliant. Carl Ravioli says the Lancia version 8260 Energy or Evasion or Ulysses was the Lancia Zeta, if I remember correctly. Yes, I think you're right about that. Mr. Coleman, Rubbish Mechanic, says good evening. Good evening, Mr. Coleman. Good evening, sir. Simone from Hood Classics is just saying not bad, thanks to Mr. Waters, the Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV. Mark from Bad Books is saying good evening to Mr. Coleman, and so is Carl Ravioli, and so Simone from Classics. John Cod Classic, the Lego of Estate now repaired after damage. Ooh, Lego Estate. What engine's in your Lego Estate, John Cotton Classics? Mr. Coleman says hello to everybody. Simon from Lot 76 Cars says, seen your Vauxhall on John Cotton Classics. Very nice. What Vauxhall is that, John Cotton Classics? That sounds interesting. Mr. Harwood says, these storms have been very annoying. I can't find the time to do some outside content. I filmed 3 cars yesterday, sir. One of them, I think, we're going to have to call Contingency Reviews Absolute Disaster Edition. Absolute and utter disaster, that was. The other 2 came out okay. You seem to say Cento. I do have another one that I filmed later in the day. But the first one I filmed, it was probably one of the worst reviews I've ever done in my life. And that's saying something. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV says, did you know that the Rover 75 is a bootleg of Austin Rover badging? I did not know that, sir. I will have to have a look at that next time I see one. Simone Hood on Classics is saying hello to John. Paulie Galtieri says, the Aston Martin DB7, DB9, electric mirror controls and Ford's parts bin. Yes, it's the good old Mark, I think Mark 3 or 4 Fiesta mirror switch. Is that the same mirror switch on a late Sierra as well? Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe says, Rubbish Mechanic is on. The Rubbish Mechanic is indeed here. Rubbish Mechanic really doesn't live up to his name because although he's a mechanic, he's not in any way rubbish. In fact, he should be called the stupendously amazing mechanic, really, but the name is funnier that way. Simone from the Classic says that John has a lovely Allegro estate on his channel. The Allegro estates are very rare. I look forward to having a look at that. David Clark says, good evening. An Alfa Romeo 166 sold for £5,100 in January earlier this year and is now up for about £10,000 with a dealer in Chichester. I'll let Mr. Coleman talk about that, actually, because he is the 166 expert on this chat. Henry Hall 8538 says, yes, indeed, 3-cylinder turbo with correctly fueled engine. Yes, we don't talk about a certain type of fuel on this channel. Thank you, sir. Yes, it's not a bad engine, that Pure Tech. Although we'll see later on if those actually last as long as we think that they actually will. The one before that that was used in lots of PSA cars, we can't talk about that either because it is terrible. David Clark says, surely you could get the car for £5,500 manufactured. It's done 22,600 miles. We're going into sort of territory here where we're talking about dealer margins and things. I probably can't talk about that sort of too much. Maybe, I don't know, a channel like what would be a good one to sort of explain that. I think probably something like Chop's Garage is good for that kind of thing. Right. Mr. Coleman says, I did some content yesterday and it came out okay. Getting weather. Yes, Mr. Coleman had a go at changing the spark plugs in his 166 twin spark. Obviously, say Mr. Coleman had a go. I mean, Mr. Coleman did a fantastic job, and you should watch the video if you. I think you're changing, spark plugs in a twin spark engine because he's very good at that sort of thing. Russell Cooper, this is an interesting comment, Russell. Always wondered why the base model of the Allegro is called the Deluxe. It sounds a bit ironic. The thing is that the Volvo 240 in the 1970s and 80s, DL version stands for Deluxe, and that was also the base model. So maybe it's just a thing people did. Mr. Harwood, yes, you have heard many things about the not very rubbish mechanic, particularly about Rover 45 and Swindon Civic rust issues. Yes, he's an expert on that kind of stuff. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, I know what you mean about filming outside at the moment. I went with a new mic setup today to film retro car meet, and rain and wind meant I couldn't use a microphone. Yeah, I don't use a microphone at all for filming outside. I do sometimes when I'm actually driving. It sometimes helps a little bit, not always. Don't no budget reviews, of course. I don't use anything no budget reviews because that's not the point. But I don't use a microphone outside unless it's a really, really professional one. That's for trajectory reviews. Tom Classic says hello to Mr. Harwood. Transit Gaming. Have you ever driven a van? Yes, I have. I've driven a lot of transits. I can't remember what mark we're on at the moment, but I've driven several of the current generation Transit Customs, and I've driven a couple of previous generation Transits to that, the ones that were made in Southampton, because the factory where they made the Transit until 2013, when went to Turkey, is about a mile and a half from here. It's walking distance from my house, but it's gone now. It's not like there. It's warehouses and things. But yeah, they were made just up the road from here. Yes, and also a Vauxhall Vivaro. It's on the channel. There's a walk around of a Transit Custom I drove and a Vauxhall Vivaro on the channel somewhere. It's a long time ago. That's 2019. I drove those. John Cotton Classics says you might my 1750 manual Allegro Estate. Ooh. Yes, please. Ooh, 1962 Vauxhall Victor FB Super. That sounds very nice as well. That's very, very nice. Roach Mechanic is saying hello to Mr. Harwood. Yes, good evening. Mr. Harwood is saying hello to Simone from Classics and also to Mr. Coleman. Simone says, would you drive a hydrogen car, give him a chance? Oh, absolutely, yes. The thing is that a few years ago, Mr. Richardson from Furious Driving drove a Toyota Mirai, not the current one, the previous one, and the video just bombed on his channel completely. I've been a bit scared about trying one that sort of thing because I drove a 2018 Prius on Tree Jacket Reviews in 2019, and the video also completely bombed. So I'm just a little bit worried about driving that in case the video just totally bombs. Car Reviews is Russell Cooper. It's the base model of Fiesta being called a Popular. Yeah, no carpets and rubber floor mats. Good old Popular. Mr. Coleman, Rubbish Mechanic, says Alpha 166 is rocketing in price over the last 2 years. They're a very good car. Yes, he has. He has a lot of experience in 166s. David, if you want to know anything on 166s and Mr. Coleman, it is your man. Traberlee has very kindly given a super chat donation. That's very nice of you, sir. You can see it's just come up on the screen there. Super chat is also available as well as channel memberships. There are some people on here that are up to I think it's 3 months now being channel members, or 2 months, and their icons have changed. We've got various icons of different cars which show the level of channel membership they're on. Yes, David Clark is having a chat with Mr. Coleman. Yeah. Mr. Coleman's talking about the Ford parts bin. One of my old Dennis trucks at work has Ford Focus wiring looms in the doors and Ford Ka heater vents. Paulie Galtieri says, what do you think about these homemade Rover 45 Tourers? The only one I'm aware of that's a 45 Tourer is one that's been owned by the Vicar of Longbridge. I think there's an MG ZS Tourer, a 180 done as well, but he originally had the front end of a pre-facelift 45 on it. I think the car in an accident he put a post-facelift 45 front end on it. I don't know if he still got it or not. There are pictures on the internet that you can see it, but it's still got the incorrect dashboard, a pre-facelift dashboard in it, not the post-facelift one. But interesting, yeah. The car maybe they should have made, I don't know. Alan Tom's talking about cheap cars badged as fancy things. I suppose if they badged it the skint edition rather than a deluxe, it might have an impact on sales. Yes, I think so, sir. Transit gaming. I wish I could drive a van, but I'm 15 years old. I'm 16 this year. I go for a Ford e-Transit. Yes, I think they're coming out quite soon. There's actually a scheme, several schemes. There's one that you can drive a classic at the British Motor Museum if you're, I think, between about 11 and 16. But you can also just go for a standard Corsa, and I think it's called Vauxhall Early Drive. My nephew's actually, he's, how old is he? About 15, I think. He's just booked himself an experience to go and drive a Corsa at Vauxhall Early Drive. They're all over the country. It may be something that you want to ever go in. I'm not doing that about the vans, but you can certainly ever go in a classic or maybe a Corsa. When I was younger, like all the driving school cars were Corsas, and all of them were. It just where things went really. I think Vauxhall gave driving schools a huge discount on them, so that's why there's so many. Hit on classics. Simone says my Mark 1 Fiesta was a 1.1 Popular Plus. Yes, the Mark 1 is very similar to a Mark 2, really. I think you can like change the doors and things like that, and the tailgate on a Mark 1 to make it into a Mark 2 and all sorts of weird things like that. I did drive a Mark 2 1.1 on the channel earlier this year. I drove an automatic one, 1.1 CTX. It was an L. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trainers TV has actually very kindly done a super chat donation. He says it's a donation for us to stop talking about forbidden fuel because we don't talk about diesels on this channel. We don't. So Mr. Waters says poverty special editions like the Escort bonus. You got metallic paint and wheel trims, and that was it over the Popular Plus. Lot 76 cars. Simon says classic van content. I don't know. It depends if I was offered one. I'm not very good at driving really old cars without things like a brake servo and an all-synchro mesh gearbox. It doesn't go very well for me. Henry Hall 8538 says to Mr. Coleman, he thinks he saw the 166 at the NEC last year. Yes, you would have done. You were in the right area for it, so you would have done. I'm not optimistic on my value of my 124,000-mile Alfa Romeo GT 2-liter JTS. I did drive a car with that engine actually quite recently. There was the 916 Spider, the very late one, 2003. I didn't think it was that bad actually. I think I've got a GT I'm supposed to be doing at some point. Hopefully, I've been trying to do it for absolutely ages, but it's proving a bit difficult to just arrange a time to go and do it at the moment. Simone says the Mark II Transit is my favourite. The current one is hideously ugly. The Mark II, do you mean the facelifted Mark I that was made until about 86? Is that the one that you mean? Mr. Coleman says those in the market for an Alpha 166, now it's time to buy one. There are less than 120 examples remaining in this country. They're going for serious money now. They don't rust as they're galvanized. Yeah, they don't need to rust for 166s. Sir Depeche says, I don't think I'd pass as a 16, sir. Maybe you were 16 a while ago, Sir Depeche. I don't know. I don't make comments on people's age most of the time. I've got a Jag and a Stag. Says, imagine a 166 3-litre. I have driven a 166 3-litre. Mr. Coleman used to have one. It was actually on Tweed Jacket Reviews. We did it in February 2020, so 2 years ago. You can have a look at the Tweed Jacket Reviews playlist, and you can have a look at Mr. Coleman's lovely 166. And you can have a look at his channel too, and look at more Busso engine 166 content. Carlos Sidoli says, have you driven the new BMW M3? I'm afraid not. I haven't driven the new 3 Series at all. Sorry about that. Hooked on Classic says, TC, that's the Cortina Mark III, has a brake servo. Thank goodness. That's good. I think they're on all synchro mesh gearbox in those as well. Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe says, Thankfully, my Triumph Vitesse is synchro mesh on first and a brake so upgrade. Thank you, sir. That's what we'd like to see. Duncan Letts says, what's better, a 911 or a Boxster? I haven't actually ever driven a Porsche, really. I'm hoping to do one later this year. I have been offered one. Yeah, I really can't comment on that. I haven't driven either of those, I'm afraid. Chambers 101 says the Bullnose Transit. Was that the one that had the V6 or the Forbidden Fuel engine in it? We can talk about the V6. We can't talk about the Forbidden Fuel one, obviously. Adam Tom says, I like the 166. The 159 sports wagon looks very nice. I saw one on the road today. Do they have any serious problems? I think Mr. Coleman is your expert for that, Mr. Toms. Hayden Saxby. Oh, good evening, sir. He says, ever seen a Lancia Upsilon? I saw a V-Reg one yesterday. Left-hand drive, obviously. I have seen them because I've been on the continent. They're obviously around. The last one we got, the Lancia badge, was the Y10. I think that was on sale in this country until 1994. The Chrysler Ypsilon was on sale, I think, from 2011 to 2015. And that's still being made, actually, under the Lancia badge. It's probably quite late on in its production life because that's based on the old Fiat Panda platform, under 500 platform. The Panda came first in 2003. And those three cars are all still being made. Although the Mark III Panda is a bit different from the the Mark IV, it's called, not the Mark III. The Mark IV Panda is a bit different from the Mark III, but it's still the same platform. Still go into Italy and buy a brand new Lancia Ypsilon if you want. Hit on Classic says, hello to Sir Depeche. Sir Depeche himself says, I had a rather spicy curry last night and I had to get a huge load off my mind. Yes, I bet that caused some fire, sir. John Cotton Classic says, my Victor's no servo, poor brakes, no seat belts, great fun to drive. I think I'd have to be very careful in something like that, prevent myself sort of crashing into a hedge. Mark from Bad Books says, I remember Mark 1 Fiesta replacement tailgates were Mark II. Yeah, you can just slap them on, can't you? By the late 80s, you could easily see if there'd been an accident. That's interesting. Travelly says, good night, sir. Duncan Letts, yes, the ND Mazda MX-5 and the Fiat 124 Spider were the same. Yes, the 124 Spider is a car that I've actually been offered for review. Someone's actually got one, so I'm going to go and have a look at one of those later this year. Mr. Coleman says 159 is a good looking car. He doesn't really touch Alphas, which were coded with General Motors, because they do rust up subframes like nothing. Not much alpha in them. The thing about the 159 is that V6 in them wasn't a Busso, it was a General Motors developed V6 in those. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV is talking about another rebadging as the Fiat Bravo and the Chrysler Lancia Delta. Yeah, I did do a Chrysler Delta on the channel. It was a 2011 one on Pre-Jacket Reviews again in 2019, if you want to see that. I think I've got one of the only Chrysler Delta videos from the last couple of years, actually. Paulie Galtieri is talking about the Radiator Transit. That's, I think, an 83, so that'd be Mark II. I know the one you mean. But it was in the later series of Minder without Dennis Waterman. I think there was Gary Webster, I think, was the name of the actor for Ray Daly. Mr. Harwood from Rover Joe says, I need to get a set of dealer plates for the Civic at some point, probably after it's been welded. Yes, that's not a bad idea. I do like a nice set of clean dealer plates. I'm reluctant just to spend money on my car and get a proper set done, because the ones on the car were actually put on by the second place that sold it, which was an independent second-hand dealer in the sort of Poole area, Bournemouth, and they're not the nicest plates, but it's all right. The thing is, the car's in daily use, and there's so many other things that would be important to actually get done before that, so just leave it as it is, really. Simone Printon Classics says the Czerny Fiat using the body shell from the 124 that became the Lada Riva, amongst others. Yes, many others. So many. I think the Larder Reaver is being still made in Egypt or something strange. Cerdapash mode. Can we start to wind things up now? I think I need to go and powder my nose. If you've got bladder problems, Cerdapash, so maybe we will have to draw things to a close. Mr. Coleman says he got original dealer plates on his Cherokee. Yes, the Cherokee is going to come back fixed at some point, isn't it, sir? Right. So since we seem to have come to the end of the questions, I think that's plenty for us for this evening. That's a lot of questions we've had tonight. Obviously, a very productive live stream. So thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching a slightly less than professional live stream number 23. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for those who've donated by super chat tonight. Like this video, leave a comment below if you're watching on catch up, and we will have the next live stream in 2 weekends time, either on the Saturday or the Sunday. I'll have to decide at the time. Thank you ever so much indeed, everyone. Yes, Mr. Waters is talking about original dealer plates, SMC of Uxbridge. Right. Good evening, everyone, or night, I should say. Thank you.